Aloha and good afternoon, everyone. It is Thursday, April 6, 2023. I call the Committee on Public Infrastructure and Technology to order. I would like to welcome Vice Chair Say, Councilmember Wire, and Councilmember Tolba to the chambers today. Pursuant to Section 92-3.1 Hawaii Revised Statutes, this meeting will be conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology with the following procedures in effect for the meeting. Members of the public will be allowed to provide oral testimony on all items on the agenda in two ways, remotely and in person in the council chamber. Remote and in-person oral testimony will only be allowed when the agenda item is taken up. Committee clerk, do we have any in-person or online registered testifiers?
Yes, Ms. Chair, we have online.
Online. Perfect. We have one online testifier, so a few friendly tips. Video conference from a quiet location if possible. If you're watching the proceedings on Honolulu, please mute your television at the time you're called to testify. When the timer on the screen reaches 0, please conclude your remarks promptly. Once all the remote testifiers have testified, I will proceed to in-person testimony in the chamber. Persons who have not registered will be given an opportunity to speak following the oral testimonies of the registered speakers. Clerk, can we please take the first testifier remotely?
Hello.
Hi, good afternoon. Please go ahead and announce your name, and we're testifying on item number 1, which is our informational briefing. Hello, Angela.
I think something's going on with the technical, with the connection or something, but I'm just going to testify in strong support.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else registered to testify, Ms. Clerk?
No, Ms. Chair.
Okay. Are there any other persons in the chamber wanting to testify? Great. Members, our first and only item is an update on the city's energy plan. We talked about this a little bit in our last hearing. We wanted to bring this into the council chamber so we could all do a learning session. Joining us in the council chambers, we have Director Haku Millis and Division Chief Alin Lee from Department of Design and Construction, Chief Resilience Officer and Executive Director Matthew Gonzer from the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability and Resiliency, along with Brody McMurtry from Johnson Controls, Inc., to give a brief presentation on the committee to the committee. For your information, the presentation is available online as Miscellaneous Communication 219. Please proceed, Director.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Committee Vice Chair Tupola, and Committee Chair Tupola and Vice Chair Say, Council members. Haku Millis with the Department of Design and Construction. Here today to present information on the Energy Performance Service Contract. As you mentioned, we have our consultant here and work very closely with CCSR, with Matt Gonzer. But Alan Lee is the lead of our Mechanical Electrical Division and is the head of this project. So this project involves many city facilities, and the reason why this project lies with DDC is by charter. DDC is responsible for long-term planning and energy efficiency with city facilities. So Alan has taken this on along with previous projects to kind of lead that charge for the city. I won't take any of his thunder, but I believe Matt Gonzer is going to be up first to share some information. Thank you.
Aloha, good afternoon. Matt Gonzer, Executive Director for the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability and Resiliency. We'll be hearing specifics about this really exciting project, this Energy Savings Performance Contract in partnership with JCI from Alan Lee, as Director Millis just pointed out. But to take a step back, I just wanted to remind that there are actually a whole suite of things that our office is responsible for tracking, measuring, and reporting. And actually, the most recent ordinance that was just passed that required OCS to develop a table to identify all the things that agencies are responsible to report back to council on a regular basis, includes all of this information. So we collect this information in partnership with the operating agencies and the other departments. A lot of it does get reported annually in the city's annual sustainability report, which we will be providing to council this month. Happy Earth Month to all of us. And we look forward to providing any additional briefings on that if you would like. But as you can see, electricity consumption is a really important thing, and you'll hear more from Alan that this notion or target of how much we spend on electricity is a moving target for two primary reasons. The price of electricity changes, but also our consumption changes. So it really highlights the importance for continuing to drive our efficiency to cut costs, especially in light of some of the electricity increases. And as a quick overhead snapshot, what you're seeing on the screen and in your slide packet is the energy usage of the city over the past 10 fiscal years, almost a decade's worth of data here. And the exciting thing is that over the last 4 to 5 years, we've seen a stepwise progress on reducing our energy consumption as a city. So that goes really in lockstep with all the efficiency efforts that we're taking on. And what Alan will be providing is really exciting because we're going to see some really improved energy efficiency into the coming years. The pie chart, and this goes to a question you had for us during the first budget committee meeting, Councilmember Tupola, around which agencies are utilizing a lot of energy. And across the whole of the city, there are two major users, and that's the Board of Water Supply and Environmental Services. That's primarily because the kinds of operations that they have are very energy intensive. The Board of Water Supply obviously is pumping water from deep below our feet to storage tanks. They have additional cleaning and transmission and having to pump water all around the island. Same for environmental services. There's a lot of gravity flow, but in other locations they actually have to pump the water to keep getting it out to the treatment plants. And it's really in the treatment plants that there's a high energy use. It's really, those two are about 2/3 of the city's energy use, with all other operations making up 1/3. You see DFM, facility maintenance, as the next named agency. That's because they're the maintainer and operator of city buildings. So it's not that they inherently in their operations use energy. It's this building, the Fosse Municipal Building, and all the other city facilities that fall under their usage. And we'll have updated information in a couple of weeks that will show both calendar year and FY23 data. So Alan will be talking specifically about one mechanism that we've utilized at the city to get cost savings and energy efficiency, and that's this procurement vehicle called Energy Savings Performance Contracts. You may be familiar with past performance contracts, which included transitioning all of the city's streetlights to LEDs. So this was also done in partnership with JCI a couple of years ago. Not only are we now benefiting from year-over-year savings relative to how much we used to pay, but because of that investment and the statewide public benefits fund that gets administered through the state PUC through Hawaii Energy, we actually got a nice big rebate check once we employed all of that installation. And then another example is through just other design build work. An example out at Sand Island Wastewater Treatment Plant, they recently went through improving their UV filters. So this is part of the process for cleaning wastewater. When they installed some of these new EV tubes, they themselves not only got the benefit from reduced energy costs, but same thing, Hawaii Energy stepped up with a direct rebate because of that improvement. Though we won't be talking about it today, the Department of Parks and Recreation also has their own energy savings performance contract underway. They have a nice interactive website, which we're leaving here with you. And should you have questions on the deployment and the installation of any of those energy conservation measures, we would direct you to the Department of Parks and Recreation. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Alan Lee, the Mechanical and Electrical Division Administrator for the Department of Design and Construction, to really hone in on the exciting improvements that we've already seen and that are near completion in Phase 1, and then a whole array of projects that are coming online for facilities all across the island.
Thank you, Executive Director. Stay right there. Just in case anyone has questions now, I know some people have to leave at 3, so I just wanted to make sure. But the questions directed to him should be broad. And then I think the ones that they're going to do are more in relation to all of the building upgrades through Johnson Controls.
That is correct.
I have a few questions that I know I'm going to forget if I don't ask. So
Okay.
let me just open up to the council members first, and then I'll go last. But it's for you specifically. So council members, any questions on anything he just presented? Good? Yeah, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mahalo, Director Gonser. I'm just curious, I'm looking at the slide that has the pretty much the total consumption by year. And so I'm just wondering, with all these energy savings methods, do we anticipate that continuing to go down, or how does rail coming online factor into that, or what does our future look like in that sense?
Yeah, on balance, it's difficult to know exactly how that will play out, but that's exactly correct. We will anticipate some increased electricity consumption by the city through Department of Transportation Services as a result of rail coming online, more operations, which also highlights how critically important it is for projects that Alan will talk about as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, council members say.
Yeah, Director Gosner, my question would be in regards to procurement. Was it this past 2 days when we had our budget presentation and the zoning? There was a reference made to Noresco. Is Noresco a competitor of Johnson Controls?
They are another vendor. They're known as an energy savings company. So ESCOs provide ESPCs, and the slide here shows that Noresco was the awarded contractor for the Parks ESPC.
Yeah, see. Okay, but it is a procurement contract, meaning it's put out to bid.
Correct. These are open bid competitions, and the vehicle is called Energy Savings Performance Contract. It's that the companies themselves provide the services.
Okay, and then the next question, Director, was the fact that for me, when you look at 19, 20, and 21, that's the COVID period. Everything was shutting down that time, no? So that the consumption would drop when you have COVID. I'm just bringing this up because I don't know if the graph is very factual if you're not incorporating what happened during the time of COVID. Pre-COVID, COVID, and post-COVID.
Yeah.
My point is that the graph may be slanted away that it doesn't reflect that during the period of COVID, there was very little city, county activities and services. And the next question would be, I don't know how to quantify it in regards to some of our city workers that work from home. If I was to work from home, does the energy consumption drop by one individual? I'm trying to get to quantify something like that, just for discussion purposes.
Sure. Start with the first one. As we're now only coming, quote unquote, post-COVID, that really highlights the importance of doing this annual tracking, measuring, reporting, and then learning from it. And those are some of the stories and anecdotes that we'll have to keep diving deeper into the data. And some of these trends are, a fiscal year, FY20, it precedes COVID energy usage as well. So fiscal year versus calendar year, that's stuff that we're happy to dive further into the data. And it's now becoming more available for us to do that kind of diagnostic. On sort of like the per person energy usage, I don't think it tracks so readily in terms of a body in an FMB, right? The building is operating. The person's use, let's say the computer, is quite negligible relative to the overall operations. And then just back on the COVID notion, right? BWS and ENV were still going in terms of full operations. So in terms of like the larger aggregate users of energy, I don't want to make any conclusions about did COVID support the trend, or is it also inherently because of the energy efficiency measures that we're taking?
And then one final thought following up with Councilmember Wire. I would hope, in the upcoming years, that you could be testifying in regards to the Department of Transportation Services budget in the area of energy. Because with the transfer of HART to DTS, I think it may bankrupt the Department of Transportation Services highway budget. because I don't really believe or depend on and rely on the assumptions that they are making. So for the council members who are here, just be prepared that if there is a red flag or a deficit in their operating budget, we have to pick up the tab. Okay, but I just wanted to bring that up, that I wish you could come and testify that, hey, let's change the designs of the roofs. Doesn't have to be the waves. You could just have it be like what you would say with Mr. Lee saying, the energy efficient way of having a roof that would incorporate the solar, the wind, and maybe what the sunshine. That's what I'm trying to get at. It seems like for the past 2 years, Madam Chair, nobody was listening to me, so there was no changes in any of the designs of the stations. And all I was thinking about was saving money for Roger Morton. And then with the demise or when I say demise, the decrease in the consumption of gasoline is going to affect their particular budget also. And that's why I think the state was looking at charging by miles to generate more income.
Road usage charge.
Right.
Yeah.
You see, all these creative ideas in just trying to pick up the pieces where we're losing the revenues to make it up. That's all. But thank you very much. Keep up the good work, and I have a lot of faith and confidence in what you folks are doing.
Thank you. I do actually have a lot of constituents that ask me about how much electricity the rail is going to use and if we are ready for that. And just for the record, I did hear you, no waves in the roof, solar panels, right? Unfortunately, we weren't able to make the design for that. I do also think that the rail stations aren't a huge amount of flat surface for solar, but something is better than nothing, right? Generate some type of energy there. And I do think that Executive Director Kahikina said she was in favor of it, but we haven't heard too much energy solutions for any of the rail or operations stations. So it is a concern because it's a huge utility that we're about to absorb. Do you know, aside from just our pleas to them, is there something you guys are thinking about looking or proposing to HART or DTS about energy for the rail?
No, I really appreciate the learning opportunity. It goes two ways to hear some of the critical questions. So we'll take this question and make sure that we're better coordinating with DTS, and happy to come back at a later date to share some of their information as well.
And I don't pit this on them because obviously just getting the thing running, fixed, no cracks, the whole thing going, that's where their mind is at. We're concerned about the after, which is how can we sustain that? And if that can be taken into consideration, I'll just go into my questions. I also know that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just a note as it relates to transportation, one of the things that we also track and report to council annually is fuel consumption. So that's actually how much fuel we're using in a whole variety of our city vehicles. Just for your awareness, because we're tracking the success and progress of the electric buses, if on average they're getting about 2 to 3 miles per gallon on the diesel fuel, the equivalent mileage for the electric buses is hovering around 20 to 22. That's actually better than a lot of consumer vehicles on the road. So this energy discussion certainly is part and parcel about what we're getting from the grid, how we're incorporating that into city operations. But there's another successful and critical story of how do we continue to limit the need to import foreign oil for both city operations, but also all of us as residents. Sorry, council member.
No, you're talking about that in your annual sustainability report, you have a section about buses.
Correct, fuel usage, yep,
Fuel usage.
And the buses, yeah.
I mean, of which we have tons of vehicles in the city aside from buses that are using gas, right? So I'll look into that. When did you guys start the annual sustainability report?
The first one, I believe, came out from our office in 2018. So we're now at a moment where, the trends are not just data for collection's sake. I think it's really important that we all start to look deeply into what the data is telling us so that we can learn about operations and then think about how to course correct where needed.
The reason I asked is because Board of Water Supply had a contract with Noresco. We just talked about that offline. But prior, I do think that it concluded when I talked with Manager Lau. They're going to try to go back in for some RFPs, but the Board of Water Supply has tons of facilities, right? So we have tons of space, area of different ways that we can do energy. So I think they're going to try to go back out for bid with different projects. But I wanted to know what that contract was. Do you think that that's in the 2018?
in terms of how did it improve some of the measures and the reporting?
Right.
There is an online website at the Board of Water Supply that has the whole history
Of the Noresco contract?
of their energy efficiency, their ESPC. Yeah, I can try to track that down and just confer with the manager, Ernie Lau, and happy to share that.
Because he said they're going from 24 million to this year they're going to pay 37 million for electric. So I wanted to know how long that contract was, when they concluded it, and if we should do something similar or different to what they did. Because I definitely think with their expansion, they're doing a desalinization plant in my district and other things. We got to utilize their land and their areas for us to be more energy efficient.
And again, that's a really important distinction. You know, the contract that they had improved efficiency within their facilities. It put actually some PV on water storage tanks. There's a whole lot of great things that happened, but we're also grappling with the reality of our continued dependence on imported foreign oil and that we're beholden to the price fluctuations of that. So though they might be projecting that they're spending more, that doesn't inherently mean that their efficiency isn't as good. They might actually become more efficient, but because of the price increase, we're still paying more.
True. And I do actually think that some of the things that HECO does is with water, right? So at Kahe Power Plant, some of it is them using the water for their energy. I just wanted to know if they could become more energy efficient, even in the pumping of their water, capturing that energy as they pump it. I mean, I just shared with the gentleman here that Par Hawaii, which is in my district, their entire plant is off the grid because they're producing enough energy to sustain themselves. So they're not paying an electric bill. We're pumping water and that's energy, right? So it's cool to put solar, but that's also not capturing the energy from the pumping of the water, you know?
Yeah, I've reached the limit of my ability to speak intelligently on the Board of Water Supply, so I would defer questions to them.
Thank you. My other question was about ENV, because they are the second to the top. And some of their sewage lines have been increased. One of them was increased in size because they were going to build a Makaha resort out in our area. It never was built, actually, but the capacity of it stayed the same. So some of what they have to do is to conserve so that it doesn't overflow at night. But there is another pumping thing there that I thought could be more efficient. But I'll read your report. And the last thing was with DFM in the buildings, which I think they're going to cover, right? Almost all the DFM building stuff.
Correct, yeah.
So I'll leave that last. Then my last question was about this rebate. So the $400,000 that you guys got in the rebate, that is, so correct me if I'm wrong, energy savings performance contracts means that whoever you hire, they put in the infrastructure for free?
Alan will be able to talk through the mechanism. There's actually a slide right after this one, yeah.
Okay, I'll let him talk about that. I just wanted to know the rebate versus how much was put in, but I'll save that question for them.
Yeah, and the rebate is it's icing, right? It's like an additional bonus because of the improvements and the way that the State Public Utilities Commission has structured our public benefits fund through Hawaii Energy. But on ENV, you know, they are also obligated because of consent decree to build more treatment facilities. We know Honolulu had improvements. There's a very large-scale project at Sand Island right now for secondary treatment. They're thinking through that energy consumption concern, and there's a lot of good forethought into the construction and design for potential in-use there's different technologies to reuse the gas that's produced. There's new technology for combined power and heating so that we're not really wasting any of the things that are being generated because they know it's going to be a high energy demand. So they're making sure to use the best of the best out there. But would again defer to ENV on any specifics.
Yeah, I've talked to them numerous times about the Waimanalo Gulch because the gases that are emitting, they're not capturing that either. I've talked to Hawaii Gas about it because they should have RFP'd that out. They do it for Honolulu and they capture a lot of that energy. But because all of this stuff is in my district, it's like a lot of people want to bid on these things. But I just think that there's opportunities and pockets of energy that are escaping that we need to double down on. Okay, we'll go on to the next presenter. Thank you.
Oh, hi. I'm Alan Lee, Program Administrator of the Mechanical Electrical Division, Department of Design and Construction. So good afternoon, Chair Tupola, Vice Chair Say, and members of the Committee on Public Infrastructure and Technology. I'm just going to start off by saying it was almost 2 years ago that I made this presentation to Councilmember Cordero's committee on the transportation, sustainability, and health. And that was just the introduction of this performance contract mechanism. So a lot of the slides that you folks have here were from that presentation a couple of years ago. They're just updated. So the first slide here is why are we doing this? And that's because of the city's climate action plan. Basically, strategy 6 is to maximize efficiency in our city facilities and also install more renewable energy where possible or where feasible. Next slide, please. Okay. So you asked the question a few minutes ago regarding what is an energy services performance contract. Again, this is a slide from that same presentation. Okay, essentially, energy services performance contract is we are, in a way, we're using third-party financing to fund these energy improvements and then pay for these improvements through the energy or electricity budget over a period of 20 years. So, you know, we do not pay Johnson Controls directly. We're actually paying, we're making lease payments to the financing company. For our project, it is First Hawaiian Leasing, which is a subsidy of First Hawaiian Bank. So here, if you go back, if we look at the orange column, which is the city budget, by making these energy efficiency measures, you know, our city's electricity bill will be reduced, and then that savings will be used to pay off the loan that we're borrowing from the bank, and then we can do whatever we chose to do through this net savings. One of the great things about this performance contract is Johnson Controls is going to be guaranteeing the energy that they predicted that we're going to be saving. And if they do not meet that guarantee, they pay back the city through the equivalent energy costs, or they install additional energy efficiency measures at these facilities to help offset the cost. Okay, next slide. All right, so we started with an RFP. We had, it was a competition. It was a competitive sealed proposals. Johnson Controls was the selected vendor. We contracted with them to do investment grade energy audit at our various city facilities. In this case, we wanted to start small. We picked 10 building facilities. But these are like the highest consuming energy facilities under the DFM and HFD's portfolios. So we accepted the proposal. We amended their contract and said, now go ahead, do this work. We used the calendar year 2019 as the baseline for the energy consumption, and that was pre-COVID. So at that time, the 10 buildings consumed about 18 million kilowatt hours of electricity at a cost of $4 million. Now this is in FY19 dollars, which averaged about 22 cents per kilowatt hours. And that was just only 4 years ago. Now most of us are paying like 40 cents or 41 cents per kilowatt hour. And this is their projected energy savings. The energy savings is about 6.5 million kilowatt hours. And the way we've structured the RFP is we capped what they could value the energy at 30 cents. We wanted to take this more conservative approach. In essence, this 30% or 30 cents and the energy savings is pretty much the budget that they have to work with for the next 20 years. Okay, next slide, please. All right. So these are some of the project milestones. Again, we made this presentation 2 years ago. We received proposals in 2020. We awarded the contract in July of 2020. It was a very fast-tracked approach. And we had them begin the design and construction phase in December of 2020. Basically, the performance period was supposed to end on December 2022. We gave them a 2-year construction period. They actually finished in 18 months, but we issued substantial completion with 18 months. And then what we're doing now is everything is in place. We recently closed out their construction portion for the phase 1 buildings. We received all of their closeout documents, all the material submittals, O&M manuals, and we're in the process of filing those. So now the performance period begins this year. Okay, we want 1 full year of data with everything in place. At the end of the year, then we're going to reconcile to see if they met their energy savings goals. However, while performing the work under this project, whenever we change a light bulb or replace a transformer, we start saving immediately. So during the 2-year construction period, we actually saved energy. 1.5 million kilowatts of energy was saved during the construction period, which is about 24% of the projected savings as if everything was in place. So that's a really good number. So, based on the current value or cost of electricity now at 40 cents, during the construction period, we're able to save $600,000. And then we do have the website, sustainablehonolulu.com. The site's constantly being updated, and one of the slides or one of the sections in that website is actually a project tracker. So for the first 10 buildings, we have all these check marks and we're complete. And then during the process of the work on the 10 buildings, we asked Johnson Controls send us another proposal to do 80 more sites, the rest of the city buildings excluding parks and E&V. So we amended their contract. I think you can go to the next slide. So we have this phase 2 or 2A project that we just started off on. We're in the middle of construction, and we're listing the sites there and the energy conservation measures that are currently being implemented. The baseline energy for those sites were based on the calendar year 2020 at 23 million kilowatt hours of energy use, and $6.5 million in electricity costs. But now, just in 1 year, the cost of electricity went up from 22 cents to 28 cents per kilowatt hour. And then the projected energy savings is 4.3 million kilowatt hours, or $1.3 million at 30 cents per kilowatt. So also on the project website, there is a listing of all the facilities that are currently worked on and the percentage of completion, including the work that we're doing on photovoltaic systems. So that's available. You folks can take a look at it. Okay. All right. Next slide, please. Oh, yeah, okay. All right, so this is the data for the phase 2 or 2A project. Proposals were submitted in June 2021. We amended the contract in August 2021. 21, and we're giving Johnson Controls just 2 years to complete work at 80 sites. Imagine that, 80 sites. I would say we're about 50% done. We're also amending the contract by adding 6 months. And this is where the 2A comes in. While Johnson Controls was looking at these facilities for photovoltaic systems, they pointed out that, hey, some of these facilities, the roofs are in pretty bad shape. If we are able to fix the roofs, we can probably put more photovoltaic systems on the roofs of these buildings. So we had them crunch some numbers, look at their proposal again and say, yes, we can do this. We can amend the contract. We'll fix the roofs, which allow us to put more PV on some of these sites. And therefore, we're giving them a 6-month extension to complete all of the roofs. Okay, next slide. Now, let me talk about renewable energy, which is ECM1, energy conservation number 1 in our portfolio of energy conservation measures. Earlier I talked about an energy services performance contract where we used third-party financing to finance all of the improvements, and then we pay for it through the energy savings over a 20-year period. We're using a little bit different financing mechanism for the renewable energy portion. And I believe that Council Chair Waters mentioned it during the budget hearings, and this mechanism is a power purchase agreement. Under this agreement, we are buying electricity from a third-party entity. We're buying the electricity generated from the solar panels. We do not pay for the solar panels or the installation themselves, just the energy that it's produced. So it's incumbent upon the third-party provider and their contractors to put these systems on these roofs and get it done as quickly as possible because that's how they get paid. Johnson Controls is assisting with the project management of that aspect. Now, under the power purchase agreement, the cap is 9.3 megawatts of PV panels that we can put on these facilities. At that time, when we signed off on this power purchase agreement, the first year that we would pay the third-party provider, the cost of electricity would be 21 cents. So when I did this slide 2 years ago, I noted that, we'll be paying 2/3 of the cost that we'd normally pay Hawaiian Electric. Now, 2 years later, the cost of the electricity that we're going to be paying the third-party provider is half. Right? Hawaiian Electric is charging everyone 40 cents per kilowatt hour now. We're only going to be paying 21 cents. That's one of the points that I wanted to make on this particular topic. But one of the other things that I think this is of interest of Council Member Say is the Department of Design and Construction is currently in design for the new early education center on top of the Civic Center parking structure. As part of the design effort, we are going to make that facility PV ready so we can have Johnson Controls and the power purchase provider install the PV panel. So this is just a rendering. We're still in the design phase, but this is what that facility could look like with PV panels on top of the buildings. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so this is just to give you an update on the status of where we're progressing on the photovoltaic system work. So in June of 2022, we had 5 PV systems that were brought online. As of February of this year, we now have 32 systems. And these systems provide 847 kilowatts of electricity. This is the total amount of electricity that was generated during this period. Now, the cost that the city is paying the third-party provider is $76,000, which seems rather small. But again, we're just starting this project at only 847 kilowatts, and we have, we're going up to 9.3 megawatts. But now, if we did not put in this PV system on these sites, we'd be paying Hawaiian Electric $145,000. So again, we are saving about half. But actually, this slide is already outdated. Since I sent this slide out last week, Thursday, we brought on 4 more systems online. I don't have the data yet, but we'll be updating this when the March bills come in from the third-party provider. But I wanted to point out that, these 4 new sites will bring a total about 1 megawatt of PV power, and the largest site is included in this to date, and that's the fire department's Waipahu maintenance facility. It's their maintenance yard for the fire trucks. So, one thing that's great about having a partnership with Johnson Controls is, I'm letting them do all of the hard work, and I get to stand here and report in front of you. But one of the things that just recently occurred with the Hawaiian Electric Company is they've announced, a new, interconnection method. And I believe last month in this committee, Hawaiian Electric introduced their new community-based solar program, or community-based renewable energy, or CBR. So this is a situation in which others can, join the party, have renewable energy or use renewable energy at their facility, even though they don't have PV panels on their roofs. So as Johnson Controls has, and their team, been going to the different sites, they've been finding that sites such as our corporation yards that have a lot of roof area, but they don't really consume that much electricity themselves. So we have, a lot of vacant roofs that potentially we could install more PV panels and perhaps get credit for that electricity generated in other sites that cannot put PV, like here at Honolulu Hale, because of the historic nature in our building, or FMB, because our roof area is just so small that it's not practical. So I've asked Johnson Controls, hey, let's get together with Hawaiian Electric and let's explore this so we can, maximize the 9.3 million cap that we have on our power purchase agreement, so we can, increase our portfolio of renewable energies across our city buildings. That's all I have for you today. Do you folks have any questions for me or Brody McMurtry from Johnson Controls?
Thank you. Councilmember Tolba.
Awesome. Thank you, Chair. It's pretty exciting. Yeah, and I kind of mentioned this at the Department of Parks when they came out to budget on why, I know Johnson Control does Leeward Community College parking lots. Why are we utilizing that same kind of system in over 300 parks that we have, buildings that we have? If we see the amount of money that we're saving, how do we move this thing forward?
Okay. Not sure how I can answer that question. When we started this project a few years ago, we were concentrating on the city public buildings, mostly the DFM portfolios. At that time, we were approached to include parks, but the city administration at that time wanted to use a different approach in soliciting the RFP for this performance contract. We were already underway in this process, and okay, I'm going to show my age. I've been with the city for like 35 years. This is not my first performance contract. The original city contract, the first performance contract that we did was for Honolulu Hale, and that was over 20 years ago. And then we did one for FMB. So we built up this experience. We know how to do it. I'm an electrical engineer, very detailed oriented. So we did this, go slow so we can move fast process, real detailed oriented. But the decision was made that for the parks facility, they wanted to try a little bit different solicitation. And so the decision was made, okay, continue with what you're doing, and then parks will go off on their own with their own solicitation for the performance contract for those particular sites. DDC was not at that point. DDC was not involved in that solicitation. So any further questions regarding that particular contract, I'm going to have to defer to the Department of Parks and Recreation.
Oh, thank you for this. I think it does shine a light on a lot of the questions that Councilmember Say is saying along rail. Because, I live in Eva and Waipahu. You drive along rail. In my mind, I'm going, there's no reason why we cannot put panels along rail where the sun is hitting directly on the concrete that's doing nothing. So, and then at the same time, I'm looking at how much money we're saving in this tough economic time when we're trying to. I'm glad that we are having this discussion so that hopefully the public and everyone's seeing that if we're going to get to this supposedly date, because if people go to the West Oahu campus of the University of Hawaii, there's a map out there that they build out that what's going to look like in 2045. And I honestly believe if people saw that, they'll blow their mind and the spaces that are going to be taken up by solar panels, wind, just to make it to 2045. And we're not utilizing open spaces like parks, 300 of them. I mean, kind of obvious. I'm just stating the obvious. If we got to get to this 2045, it's just a comment. 2045, maybe we should start getting aggressive. If not, we're losing money monthly. And like council members say, bankrupt, Department of Transportation. Whew, Mr. Doom and Gloom, you're making me scared. So I'm just saying, it's a comment. I mean, this is awesome. Hopefully it inspires a lot of people, whoever's watching, and inspire our committee to move things along. So thank you.
And just for clarity, the 2045 is the 100% renewable goal that everyone's trying to, I get you, that everyone's trying to get to. And I get it that the parks has their own contract and it's for irrigation, plumbing, pool equipment, and LED, but we're specifically talking about solar. So I don't know if we can't just push the conversation to have two contracts, because I don't know if it's going to hurt anybody because their contract doesn't include solar. So it doesn't include coverage over parking lots. It doesn't include open spaces. I think that's what he's referring to. Mm-hmm. So like in the event that we have open space and this particular contract has to do with solar and the other ones have to do with plumbing, is it going to kill us to have two contracts in the DPR department?
I think that's a question that I guess the three departments, DDC, DPR, and more importantly, BFS would need to get together to discuss, because it is a procurement issue, a procurement question.
Okay. Councilmember Say.
Yeah, before I start off, Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I wanted to say to Mr. Lee, thank you very much. For me, you're a young kid on the block, so you got another 10 more years to go, okay? My question is really fascinating because I just wanted to find out, what is a third-party provider?
Oh, okay. Okay, well, basically, the third-party provider is right here. It's Brody McMurtry. He actually represents the third-party provider or the power purchase agreement company that was created for this project. Since I brought him here, I'm just going to let him explain what the solar third-party provider does.
May I just ask this follow-up question before Mr. Brody comes up? Is it the conventional process that we have in place with the PUC that the city is the provider of the energy, Mr. Brody is the utility, and then we got to go to PUC to get the confirmation in regards to what he can sell?
Well, I'll let him explain, but throughout this process, we did not have to go through the PUC.
Because we're essentially buying power from you.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, Brody McMurtry. Thanks for your question and thanks for the time. I really appreciate it. So yeah, a power purchase agreement is mainly set up. There are different types of power purchase agreements. Some are utility scale, as you referenced, that are approved by the PUC. That's where you're using the utility lines, which is from the utility company. But this is just directly on the facility, going directly to the F&B building. So there's no PUC approval required. Thank you.
My next question for maybe Mr. Lee or Director Miliz, would it be wise for the council on behalf of one of the freshmen, if you don't mind, having a budget proviso stating that all new city and county projects with roof incorporate this type of an arrangement?
Actually, there is an ordinance already that's requiring all city buildings to put in PV systems where feasible. So it's already built in, but I think the mechanism to the method to put in PV, I think really depends on a case-by-case basis. But for this particular example, it's already existing buildings, right? So we went through this power purchase agreement as one method of putting PV. Another method is using capital funds to put PV on buildings. But for new buildings, I know that there are energy code provisos that CCSR is working on to make new buildings, not only in city facilities, but countywide PV ready, by providing the infrastructure ready so that at a future date, the developer or the owner of the property can just install PV panels. I hope that answered your question.
Director Millis, go ahead. I feel like you're chomping at the bit.
No, I mean, Alan said most of it. That's a discussion that we need to have with the administration. From TDC standpoint and kind of our position is we absolutely should be exploring PV everywhere on city facilities with the opportunity to kind of bank where we can maximize, even though there's less usage in that particular facility, we can still maximize the total PV area.
And the only reason why I asked the question is because we still have the federal and state credits. So that's why I always say at the heart meetings that, if we got 75% paid for by federal and state credits, we're only paying 35% of this 100%, which is a great deal. But I think Brody guys are the beneficiaries of that 30%, 35%. Is that correct? I don't know. When a family or residence goes and buy their, photovoltaic for home, you get the 35% plus the 30%, so that's 65%, and all I'm paying is the 35% balance that I have to pay.
Yes, that is correct for residential. They can take advantage of tax credits, but because we are a municipal government, we don't have that luxury. We can't take advantage of those federal and state tax credits. That's why we're going through the third-party provider that can take advantage of those tax credits and also all the depreciation that they also receive. And that is the reason why they can sell the electricity to us at a reduced cost.
Madam Chair, one final question. Who was first, the city or the state, Mr. Brody, in this performance contract? I hope you say city.
I can answer that. Actually, again, yeah, I've been here a while. Actually, performance contracting actually started at the county level. It was counted a long, long time ago on the Big Island. Hilo County was the first entity that did performance contract, and then Maui and Kauai, and then it came us. And then actually the UH community colleges. So this is around 20 years ago, and then only recently, maybe a few years after that, then the state DAGs bought in. Actually, it was DBED that was kind of encouraging all of the state agencies to go through this performance contract, and they actually provided guidance to the state agencies. And for us, we were actually part of the guidance. They used the city and county of Honolulu, in fact, this building, as an example of a performance contract in their guidance document.
And just for clarity, the performance contract and the difference between the PPA is big, I feel like. Because with the PPA, you're giving an amount of energy we're trying to reach. With a performance contract, you're giving an amount that we're going to pay for it. So like right now, right, you guys did the PPA for 9.3. We're not even close to 1 megawatt yet. So you got to hit that 9.3 so that our PPA is actually maxing itself out.
Yes, that's the intent. What we're trying to do, or our contractor was trying to do, is a lot of the smaller facilities first, which is putting in the PV systems on existing roofs, such as the police stations and fire stations. We've done most of that work. Now we're venturing into the larger carport structures, such as Kapolei Hale, Joint Traffic Management Center, parking structure, Kapolei Police Station, Blaisdell Center, which will feature a battery system because most of the Blaisdell activities are at night. And those systems, they take a lot more engineering design work to achieve because you actually have to build a structure first, like a steel carport canopy. So more engineering work is involved. And because there are larger size systems, more coordination with the utility is also involved. So those projects are currently in design, and we are hoping that we can begin construction on some of those larger structures this year to get to the 9.3 megawatts.
Councilmember Wire, any questions?
No, Chair, thank you.
Okay. I just wanted to ask a question about this slide, the ESPC for city buildings. You guys had the baseline energy usage in 2019 with electricity costs of $4 million. Then the next one on the bottom, you said projected energy savings would be that the electricity cost would drop down to 1.9 million, right? So that was that. I'm guessing that you're saying annually we would go from paying 4 million down to 1.9, and that's for the 10 buildings.
Yes.
Okay. So then when you actually did the project and they went into construction, you're saying that the energy usage during construction, which was a year and a half, so not a year, so we're in a different time frame here. Mm-hmm. So in the year and a half, you're saying that we used the X amount of kilowatts, which was significantly lower than the baseline or the projected, right? Because you're saying in a year we used 18 million kilowatts, right? So we're using megawatts. So I'm just looking at this, and you're saying we saved 625,000 in electricity, meaning that the bill came down to 625,000, or we saved 625,000.
That's the amount that we saved.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess that was different because on the top, I think you're putting electricity costs, and on that one, it should say 625,000 saved, not how much we paid for electricity, right?
Okay.
Just for clarity, because I think one, we're measuring two different timelines, and then two, we're saying the savings and not the costs. Just a small correction there. And then for the part that you guys have in regards to solar and the buildings, et cetera, and I heard you guys say you're going to put this over more buildings and whatnot. My question is, does Johnson Controls do any type of energy capture for gas or for energy generated by water? Or is it just strictly electric, such as lighting and solar?
Methane or gas capture was not in their proposal because, well, we didn't include the ENV sites. And, I'm not sure, well, actually, Brody and I had this discussion during lunch day about, using ocean seawater, but, we don't own the ocean, we don't have sites there, so we did not consider using water as a source of energy.
Well, we have pumping stations and we have other things where we pump a lot of water in ENV, but we can capture energy that way. I'm just asking because in addition to what you guys are doing, which is great, there are other ways to capture energy in the ways that we operate in the city. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if that needs to be a different PPA that you guys go out for, because like you said, ENV and BWS are a huge amount of electricity. And sure, put PV on every single pumping station, but we still have more energy we can capture even after that.
Okay, so when those agencies resolicit their RFP for energy conservation measures, perhaps an ESCO would propose a feasible way of capturing that water and converting that to energy. But it was not part of what Johnson Controls proposed for city buildings that does not have that water generating or water pumping capability.
And then what do you guys recommend as far as this whole transition from rail, from HART to DTS? We're like suggesting all these things and, HART's right at this point where they're going to hand off to DTS. So is this something that we should propose to DTS that they need to start to look into an RFP for rail energy savings?
Yeah, I would think that's something they're thinking about. But as you kind of mentioned, the priority is getting operation, right?
We're not trying to task anyone with anything before we get the thing going.
Right. I imagine that's kind of the end game is having PV where feasible on the system. But, getting the rail up and running as it should be is their number one focus.
Okay, well, that's all the questions I have. Members, any other questions? We appreciate your time, gentlemen, and thank you, Executive Director Gosner, for being here. We will look through the sustainability report as an overall so that we can stay updated with everything that's happening. There is this link that they put for resilientoahu.org where we can also go, as you guys finish your projects, we'll see it kind of come online little by little. So every little bit helps and every dollar saved is good for the city. Right, guys? Let's
absolutely
save those dollars. Okay, before we can, members, we have no other discussion and no other questions. Thank you everyone for your attendance. There being no further business, the meeting is adjourned.